Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Lipchick, and our topic for today is classical conditioning. For this discussion, we will define learning as a persistent change in behavior due to experience. Classical and operant conditioning are the two types of learning studies done by behaviorists. Behaviorists seek to explain behavior based on measurable events within the environment. Behaviorists utilize the scientific method to reveal laws that govern behaviors. And they focused on reflexes as they are observable aspects of behavior. A reflex is a reliable and rapid response to a stimulus or a stimulus response association. A stimulus is any object or event within the environment that an organism attends to. Reflexes are behaviors that have become useful to our success within our environments. Organisms are born with reflexes and have the capacity to discontinue responses to repetitive stimuli. This ability is called habituation and is a basic component of learning. Early behaviorists believed that reflexes and concepts were joined together or associated to form complex behaviors and ideas. From their studies, behaviorists identified principles of association that include contiguity. When experiences occur close together in time or space, it is more likely that the thought or presence of one will elicit the other. And frequency. The association between experiences or ideas becomes stronger with repetition. Intensity. The greater the attention getting an object or event, the more likely it is to be associated with contiguous, that means sequential events, especially if the stimulus involves pleasure or pain. Similarity. The thought of one concept often leads to the thought of a similar concept. Behaviorist Ivan Pavlov believed these principles were the basis of associative learning. Associative learning is defined as any response by an organism, voluntary or involuntary, that could be associated or conditioned with any stimulus. Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov is the best known researcher of classical conditioning. While studying the digestion of dogs, he noticed that dogs reflexively salivated in the presence of food. His further investigation allowed him to identify two types of reflexes. One, an unconditioned response, an innate or inborn response that an organism has. Two, a conditioned response, a response or reflex that an organism learns through experience. Unconditioned stimuli are associated with unconditioned responses. Pavlov discovered that an unconditioned stimulus, food, created an unconditioned response, salivation, in dogs. Pavlov experimented by associating a ringing bell with the presentation of food to the dogs. Over time, the ringing bell, which is the conditioned stimulus, resulted in the dog salivating, the conditioned response. There are 6 principles of classical conditioning. 1. The acquisition procedure. A neutral or conditioned stimulus, CS, is compared with an unconditioned stimulus, US, a number of times until it can elicit an unconditioned response, UR. Higher order conditioning, that is changing of conditioned stimuli so that CS in turn signals other CS. A conditioned response signals another conditioned response. For instance, a conditioned response with an unconditioned stimulus so that it elicits a conditioned response. They're paired together so that happens. Then the conditioned response is paired with another neutral conditioned stimulus. The conditioned stimulus is paired with another neutral conditioned stimulus. And after a few trials, the conditioned stimulus will elicit the conditioned response without being paired to the original unconditioned stimulus. This is called higher order conditioning. Stimulation generalization, the tendency of a conditioned response to be elicited by stimuli similar to the conditioned stimulus. Stimulus discrimination, the tendency of a conditioned response not to be elicited by stimuli similar to the conditioned stimulus. Extinction, the gradual weakening and disappearance of a conditioned response when the conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without being paired with the unconditioned stimulus. And spontaneous recovery. After an organism has acquired a conditioned response and then has the response extinguished, it no longer responds to the conditioned stimulus. After the organism has rested for a period of time, it is presented with the conditioned stimulus again. It will elicit the conditioned response. The principles of classical conditioning can be found in everyday life. They are used constantly in marketing and sales with bright colors, patterns, and packaging. Advertisers often pair a product with an attractive person, increasing the likelihood that it will be purchased. And images and emotions have powerful impacts in advertising. Examples of other uses of classical conditioning include training animals, behavioral modification, such as in education, systematic desensitization for anxiety relief. For instance, if you have a phobia of snakes, presenting you with snakes until you're conditioned to it. Aversion therapy, pairing unpleasant conditioned stimuli with an unconditioned response, an unpleasant conditioned stimuli with an unconditioned stimuli. Substance abuse treatment can also be brought about with classical conditioning. And placebo effect treatment, that is giving somebody a pill which is just made out of sugar in order to treat an ailment where they believe they have an illness but actually don't. Okay, that concludes our discussion. Thank you very much for attending. I look forward to seeing you in the live lesson. Have a great day. Bye-bye.